We both won.
Yeah, kind of, right? So, hello today to PoliticTacToe. Today we are here with whom are we here today?
Professor Kalypso Nicolaïdis from Oxford University.
Yeah. So, welcome here. What are you working on exactly?
Well, I work on many things. I try to understand this crazy world of ours and why we are sometimes at peace and why we're sometimes at war and why we can cooperate in spite of all the divergence and conflict and the tensions that are happening in this world.
Mm-hmm. You're especially working on the European Union. Why are you so passionate about it?
Well, you know, I'm here in the lovely University of Göttingen, and colleagues here invited me to give a keynote speech yesterday, and at some point I said, as we said in May 68, the personal is the political. And it's true that many of us, you know, somehow we have to look back in our personal history to understand what we did. And for me, I was raised by a French-German mom and a Greek father. I was always kind of the other in each country, and yet always passionate in this mixed reality of ours, which is Europe. I also spent 15 years in the US, and of course you're more European when you're abroad, so that made me even more European. But I guess more deeply, I find that the European Union project is a fascinating experiment. I'm a very critical Europhile, and I'm known to be very critical, but I think tough love is what Europe deserves, as well as we all deserve tough love.
Mm-hmm. So you have not only been researching on the European Union, but also working inside the European Union. What were your major experiences within the EU?
Wow, well, I collaborated with all the institutions of the EU. I worked at some point to advise the Commission, the Parliament on external relations, neighborhood, subsidiarity, governance, trade, in various ways. And then in 2008 to 2010, I also had the greatly exciting job of being a wise man of Europe. That's what they called us. We were a group of 12 people nominated by the European Council of Heads of States. And they asked us to write a report on the long term, on the future of Europe. 2030, but of course, as we all know, it coincided with the explosion of the European crisis, so it was a bit of a very strange time, being at the very core of power in the EU, the European Council, and having to think about the long term when everything that people cared about was the very short term. I also worked with different presidencies, the Greeks, because I'm half Greek, and I was involved with the Greek government around the time of the European Constitutional Treaty. I worked with the Dutch, I worked some with the French and the British. So I was involved in many ways as a bridge between academia and policy.
Mm-hmm. You say you were also a framer of, or were an advisor for the future of the European Union. How do you see the future of Europe, or how would you like to see the future of Europe?
Well, I hope that Europe becomes a project whose leaders accept that ever closer union and more centralization is not always the right answer to our troubles and our predicament. That somehow you have to give room to people's need to be empowered and to do things at their level. And so this is really not a right-wing sovereignist call for renationalization, but my call is to address the problem that we have in politics today, that has become a void. It's become a way, Europe has become a way for our politicians not to be accountable, but just kind of meet among themselves and then come back home and say, well, we've done it in Europe. So we need to rediscover the local in Europe. And I don't think it's opposed to European integration. but we need to reconstruct the bargain of what I call our democracy, demoi being the plural of demos. So Europe, a union of peoples who govern together but not as one, and are together by choice.
You're right now in Oxford as a professor. What is the specialty about Great Britain for this future of democracy and about the European Union? How do you see the future for Great Britain in this process?
Well, Brexit is a great paradox, isn't it? Because it proves that Europe is a democracy, that we're together by choice, that, hey, if you're not happy, you can divorce, go your own way, and that's a good thing, right? But Brexit itself is a bad thing, even if the theory is good. The actual fact that Britain will leave Europe is bad for Britain, I think, because it will lose its cosmopolitan connections with the continent. It will have trade impacts. It will have all sorts of impacts. But I think more importantly in the mind. And people who are the age of my children feel that this is a great loss for them, that they won't have the sense that they're part of this bigger European project. But I also think more importantly that it's a huge problem for Europe, for the European Union, because Britain played a very important role as the pragmatist, that the one asking the hard questions, reminding the EU that, well, you know, you just don't do things because you just want to do things at the European level or because functionally it's important. It has to have a harder test. And Britain also is, of course, very important in terms of the role of Europe in the world. So anyway, for many reasons you and I could talk about for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think it's a good thing. But do you think it's a good thing, Brexit?
Oh, I mean, we are here today to discuss your opinion. So...
but here I am talking about young people, so I was wondering what yours is.
Yeah, actually we are, as an Association for Political Science Students, in favor of a world growing together and understanding each other to better. And in this way, I think that many of us would have liked Britain to stay in the European Union. But yeah, we also want to have maybe your opinions, your questions, and if there are points you want to raise for our guest today, please raise them now, and we are open to these questions too. And I just have a short look at our discussion going on. Right now, we have nobody asking questions, but you can still raise some of them. Before coming back to that, maybe can you say some words on European federalism? I've seen that you are working on this topic too.
Well, you know, federalism is one of these funny labels, which means all sorts of different things to different people. So if in Britain, where I live, it's kind of a bad word. But on the other hand, if you think about it, humans, ever since Cro-Magnon man, Homo sapiens, you know, 50,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, they were in tribes, they were connecting to each other at different levels. In a way, you could say the unions, the way of organizing yourself at different levels, if you're groups of humans, that's as old as humankind. So to be against federalism is bizarre. The real question is, what kind of federalism? And the question I've asked in my work is whether Europe can be federal, but not a federal state, like the US or Germany. Here we're in Germany, the typical federal state, or Canada or whatever. No, Europe is federal in its broad form, but it's a federal union. And not only that, it should remain a federal union and not try to become a federal state.
Yep.
That's my one-liner.
Yeah, I think we have time for two questions from our audience right now. Zara is asking, what could the European elite do to re-engage citizens and to make them enthusiastic about Europe?
Sarah, why do you think it should be the European elite who re-engage the citizens? I think citizens should re-engage themselves, and especially young citizens. You have the web, you have all these ways of communicating and doing what we call in Oxford, you know, chaotic pluralism. And I think it's the challenge for you is to reach out to those who don't agree with you or you don't agree with them, to find new ways, technological or otherwise, or organizational, to connect beyond the echo chamber. I, was very active in the Brexit referendum, both in person but also on the web. We had a Facebook page, but I was so struck by how much we only reached people who thought like us. So I think this is one of the greatest challenges of our democracy. And European elites, you should follow you rather than you following them. Now, of course, they need to engage. They need to speak, not speak to people or try to explain the EU as if it was pedagogy. Like, let me explain better and then you'll love the EU. No, they need to be in conversations with people. Conversation rather than thinking of themselves as the elite who has all the answers. Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question to go. And so do you think European Union gonna survive the Brexit? Are we living the return of sovereign state?
What do you think? I mean, the EU, is quite a solid construct. And those who speak Armageddon's, the end of the world, the EU will collapse. I don't believe that. There's too much at stake, and we'll continue to do what we do in the European Union. So yes, I think it will survive, but I think it will survive if you say, is it the return to sovereign state? Well, the sovereign state has never gone away. Popular sovereignty, organization of democracy at the national level, remains the most important place of politics in Europe. So what we need is, what we are seeing is that people are claiming this desire for control. Yes, that was a bit of a funny slogan of the Brexiters, take your country back. And in fact, you really don't have your country back if you retreat in yourself and do not work things out with your neighbors. So we have to say that the state and politics at the state level is paramount, or at the regional level, but these should be open politics, open to each other. And I hope, I cannot predict the future, and there's nothing harder to predict than the future. But I can say that if we do try to reinvent a politics that is local but open to each other, maybe we'll go in the right direction.
The foreign policy of US regarding the allies in Balkan countries, will it change?
The problem in the Balkans is that they're asked to make all sorts of progress on the rule of law and democracy and human rights, along with economic development, convergent to Europe, when they see that Europeans themselves are diverging with each other, including their neighbors, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania. So right now, there's not a lot of momentum from within, nor is it a lot of momentum from the EU, which says, oh my God, we have enlargement fatigue, we have so many problems within already, why should we look at enlargement? So that's the reality of things, unfortunately. Although, of course, on each side, everyone will pay lip service to enlargement. If you ask me, I chair a program in Oxford called CSOX, Southeast European Studies at Oxford, and we're constantly trying to bring back enlargement on the agenda. We deeply believe in it because that's an agent for change in these countries. It empowers people who want to, fight corruption, fight nepotism, fight say in Bosnia, all the levels of governance, all of these things. There's so much to be done in the Balkans, and the Balkans are so important for us. But I'm not that optimistic for the short term, at least. So if you're from the Balkans, continue to hope. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Okay, we are running out of time, but are you okay with one more question? Because one more. Okay. Yeah, there are appearing more and more questions, but we stick to one more, and then we unfortunately have to end this interview. René is asking, could you elaborate more on why the European Union should not become a federal state, considering the huge problems the EU has currently and the apparent lack of a European identity? Even though it might survive, it seems like it is a backwards development right now in terms of political union.
There are many different ways to unite and to be Euro enthusiast and to believe in the European ideal. But my way is what I call the third way. That is that I don't think that the European ideal is about becoming one people, one European identity, especially if it's sold from above. You know, elites inventing for us what European identity means. I think European identity, or the European existence, the European project, is about mutually recognizing our differences, whether they're political, economic, cultural, all of our different ways of doing things, and engaging with them and knowing them deeply and having empathy for each other's politics and predicament, say between the Germans and the Greeks, for instance, or the Poles and the Germans, or, you know, all of these neighbors that used to be intimate enemies and are now working at being friends, which means being friends, not becoming the other or one family. It means really trying to understand the other. And I think that all of the figure of the state, a European state, too much tries to imply that we are just a single people, that Europe is going to become a nation state writ large at the European level. That lacks imagination. Instead, we are a democracy, a union of peoples. And that means each people has to be radically open to the other people. That's very hard. Radical openness is very hard. So democracy, that's not the addition of sovereignties. That's not one European sovereignty. That's something kind of in between, or a third way. And I think it's hugely demanding. Don't believe for 1 minute that it's less demanding than creating a European state because somehow it's less integrated. No, it's harder because it is about being diverse and working together as a union at the very same time and knowing each other, and that's very hard.
I think these were really good closing words, and I want to thank you for having the time spontaneously.
Me, and I have to say to our audience that this is the first time I do an online live Facebook interview, and I love it, and I think what you're doing is wonderful, and I really wish you the best of luck with this, you know, virtual politics of yours, and I want to learn much, much more about it. So please stay in touch.
Thank you a lot. Yeah, we can only give back this compliment, and also another compliment for the University of Göttingen for hosting us again. Thank you for participating, and see you next time.